So I've read just over 100 books this year, and this is the first time that I'm making a video about one, which I think just goes to prove that more books should include baking recipes. Today I'm reviewing Cruel Candy, which is the first book in Cozy Corgi Mysteries, of which there are 32 mysteries, which is an inordinate amount of crimes for a corgi to be involved in. And I'm making shortbread lemon bars, which is not really like an English food. We don't eat too many baked goods that are just bars. Every book in this series comes with a recipe that somebody makes during it. I look forward, as I read more books, to find out how often they have to be completely jammed in to the plotline. So the premise of Cruel Candy is our protagonist, Winifred, who's called Fred, and her dog Watson have moved to Estes Park in Colorado. And yeah, I had to Google how to say that. It's a real place, which is like small mountain town vibes. It's where her mum and stepdad live. Her business has gone wrong. She got divorced a few years ago, and so she's moving and setting up camp there. Now, her mum and stepdad are local property moguls, and they own this building where the previous shop owner has died. So she's going to move in there and open a bookshop. Quarter of a cup powdered sugar. A quarter of a cup. I don't have a quarter. Okay, so Winifred and Watson, the corgi, rock up. So they go look at the new shop, which used to be a taxidermy shop, which is cool and a normal thing for a town to have. And next door to it is a sweet shop. And they go in and meet the nice, friendly woman working there called Katie. And these are Katie's lemon bars that we're making. And then they meet two other older women who are sisters called Opal and Lois. And Opal runs the sweet shop. And she is, like, can I say a bitch? And Lois is a lovely, warm, Mother Nature kind of woman. And she runs, wait for it, a second sweet shop, which is on the other side of Fred's new shop. So she is surrounded by these sweet shops, but the sweet shop that Lois runs is only healthy alternatives, and it will taste like garbage. So she meets these two women. Lois is nice to her. Opal's grumpy. She's like, okay, whatever. And she leaves. So next day, she comes into her shop to start sorting it out. It's early in the morning. She goes upstairs, and the upstairs was like a flat where the previous guy, Sid the taxidermist, lived. And she goes into the kitchen, and there's a dead body, and it's Opal. Okay, from this point, I guess this counts as spoilers. If you're worried about being spoiled for the Cozy Corgi mystery, I will say I enjoyed this book, and I don't think being spoiled is an issue. Also, there are 32 books. That's bread flour. You don't want bread flour. So Opal's laying on the floor in Fred's new shop kitchen with her head smashed in, and she's surrounded by some sweets that have rolled on the floor, which little Watson wants to get into and starts eating. And she's also surrounded by loads of pots and pans and baking ingredients that she's been packing into boxes. Fred's like, there's a dead woman in my kitchen, and she calls the police. And the police show up and take a look, and there are two primary police officers. There's a grumpy female detective. I'll be honest, I can't remember her name. I think she'll become relevant in other books in the series, but like right now, she's doing nothing. And then there's Hottie McCotty, Sergeant Branson. Like, that's his first name. His name is Branson, which is a pickle. So I don't love that. But okay. It's America. You can just have anything as a first name. So the police come and investigate. She tells them what she found. They have a look around the shop, and in the basement, which she hasn't been into yet, they discover a full weed farm. So obviously Fred and Watson cannot get started putting a bookshop together because it's now the scene of a murder. So she's kind of kicked out and aimless, and she goes and hangs out with Katie next door when who should arrive but Lois, Opal's sister, who's like, what's going on? There are police cars everywhere. So they have to sit her down and tell her that her sister has been found murdered. She's pretty devastated. I don't actually know what I'm doing. I haven't read the recipe in ages. I'm just stirring flour. I can stir flour. Now, remember when I said that the shop that Winifred has taken over is actually owned by her mother and stepfather? So the police are like, okay, you own this building, we should probably talk to you. Barry, stepfather, he likes to take an edible or two. Oh my god, this book is so long. It's really not a long book. It's like 200 pages. So the police take Barry into custody, and Winifred and her mum Phyllis go down there. It cannot have been Barry. No one can think it's Barry. No one in this town thinks that Barry did it. Fred goes and has a go at Sergeant Pickle and is like, you know it's not Barry. And he's like, I have to do my job. She's like, my dad was a detective. Her dead dad was a detective. So she's like, I understand the police. I understand crime. He's like, okay, you need to stop telling me what to do. I'm not going to pin this on your stepfather for no reason, but you need to back off. So it's like a kind of shortbread base. So Fred's like, okay, by back off, he clearly means go and investigate. So she and Watson, the corgi, go around town and get to explore the high street. Now, I have subsequently Googled Estes Park, and I appreciate that it's a pretty tourist trap kind of town. It has a lot of gimmicky businesses, but nonetheless, the amount of businesses listed in this book that could not turn a profit. So we've got the two competing sweet shops, one of which nobody in town likes. There's also various bakeries and cafes. There's an old-timey photograph shop, like to have a sepia photo of yourself. There's a Christmas shop, year-round Christmas shop. There's a glass blowing shop. There's a shop that just sells bird food, which is separate from the more mainstream pet shop. So Winifred and Watson go around town, sussing out what's going on. They want to talk to everybody. They want to find another reason for Opal to have been murdered. So she goes asking around town. She lets Watson, the corgi, sniff his way to the truth. She's like, Watson, guide me. And he takes her to the shop, and then they find out loads of gossip, and she's like, well done, Watson. And I don't know if that's going to be more of a thing in the series, that he like actually can sniff stuff out. I think maybe she's just a dog. So they go to this bespoke interior decor shop where everything's made of antlers and like individual carved pieces of furniture, and chat to the owners there, who are the biggest gossips in town. And they find out from them, A, that confirmed like nobody likes Opal, B, that Opal has 3 dead husbands and everyone kind of jokes that she killed them, but they don't really think she killed them. And 3, they tell her that the owner of the glass blowing shop and the owner of the Christmas tree shop are having a secret affair, which is the side plot that I'm probably most invested in, because it makes sense, right? It's a lot of demand for baubles. So Fred comes out of that and she's like, okay, nobody likes Opal, and she's got these dead husbands. Like, there's something else going on. It's gonna be that somebody had a grudge against her. It's nothing to do with Barry. So she keeps going around town. She goes and visits her uncles, who are fun but have like no relevance to this book. And she also finds out that Opal was dating Sid, the taxidermist, who may be involved with the weed. So the police have let Barry go at this point. They're like, you're fine, don't worry. So everyone's happy about that. But Fred finds out from her stepdad, Barry, who used to get his weed from Sid, and then Opal got involved, started blackmailing him, saying that she would tell Barry's wife, Phyllis, that he was eating edibles, which Phyllis would not approve of. And I think the point of that was that I don't know. Anyway, so Barry starts getting his weed from a nearby town with like a licensed shop. There's no licensed shop in Esther's Park, so Sid's like under the table, but there's a proper shop in a different town. So Fred goes to visit the proper dispensary and meets the guy who works there, who's like the first hipster that she's ever met in her life, and she can't cope, which is quite funny. He loves Barry. He's like, Barry's a great guy, and they chat about Opal and Sid, and he reveals that he used to supply Sid with weed to sell, but then he got cut out of the business when they started growing in the basement of the taxidermy shop, which is a normal sentence that I was absolutely expecting to say this week. Everyone hates Opal. She's got these dead husbands and she's cutting people out of the local drug industry. There are so many motivations for her murder. But for Fred, like, that's not enough. There needs to be another motivation. So when she was in her shop and she found the dead body, she also found a freezer with an owl in it. And I'm sorry I missed that detail out, because a freezer with an owl in it is quite exciting. It's the only dead animal left in the shop, and she finds a feather on the floor and she keeps the feather. Maybe the owl killed Opal. No, she doesn't think that. I think maybe the owl killed Opal. She's like, I don't know enough about owls. I'm near a massive national park. I'm gonna drive into the mountains and talk to a ranger. So she goes to the park and she finds a ranger like at the entrance. I don't know, it's not a thing here. And then for the whole of their conversation, she's so overwhelmed by how much he looks like Oscar de la Hoya that she honestly can't cope. She thinks this guy is so hot, she cannot have a conversation. So I don't have a mental image of Oscar de la Hoya, and I had to Google him, and then I was like, what? And then I Googled Oscar de la Hoya young, and I was like, okay. She's like, what's this feather? He looks it up and it's a Mexican something owl, threatened but not endangered. She's like, okay, maybe this could be something. Maybe Sid was out there taxidermying owls he shouldn't be taxidermying. She is not short of theories. And I love that for her. It's not a long novel. We've read like 100 pages at this point, and she's like, day 1, move to a new town. Day 2, find a murdered body. Day 3, come up with 7 different theories. So she goes home. She's living in her like grandparents' old cabin. It's very old but cute vibes. It's a little bit like cottagecore, cabin core. Cabin core sounds a lot more creepy. We have a lightly brown shortbread. But who should come knocking at her door but Sergeant Pickle? They have some more of their, you're obstructing a criminal investigation flirtation. And he's like, you need to leave the investigation to us. I've had complaints about how you're going around town, like harassing everybody. She's like, I'm just doing market research, baby. And he's like, really? Are you trying to solve a crime? She's like, yeah, I'm trying to solve a crime. My dad was a detective, did you know? He's like, look, I get it, and you seem cool, but you need to stop. And over the course of this conversation, she reveals to him that Eddie, the guy who owns the weed dispensary in the other town, was previously supplying to Sid. And Sergeant Branson is like, okay, we need to look more into this drugs angle. And also, you can have your shop back. We've sorted it out. A cup of sugar? Okay, so like the next day or whatever, Fred feels bad because she feels like she's kind of sold Eddie out to the police, even though like he was doing a crime, but like he's not doing it anymore. And she just feels bad and she feels like she should give him a heads up. So she goes over there, but when she gets there, the shop's empty. So she goes in the back, normal behavior, and finds Eddie dead on the floor. This was 77% through the novel. Like, I was reading on Kindle, so it told me that. I didn't do the maths. There's another dead body, which I was not anticipating. If you're going to write 32 books about murder in the same town, a town which, according to Google, has a population of like 5,000 people, I wasn't expecting to get more than one person murdered per book. I don't have actual lemons because I'm not fancy, and I decided to do this yesterday, so we're using lemon juice. Now, Eddie has been shot, whereas Opal was hit in the head with like a rolling pin. The police come, take it over, and everyone is kind of like, Opal's murder was clearly to do with the drugs. She was literally running a weed farm. She was baking edibles. That's why she was in the kitchen of the taxidermy shop, was to bake edibles. She was in kind of like a drug feud with this guy, Eddie. He's now been shot. And Fred goes and has a cute dinner with her family, and they're like, yeah, that's really distressing, but you know what? It's clearly absolutely nothing to do with Barry. Like, he's completely in the clear now. You helped prove it had nothing to do with Barry, which, I mean, even Winfred points out that she didn't. Eddie getting shot pointed that out, and she didn't shoot Eddie. But her job is done, and it's not actually her job to solve the murder. They do point this out to her. She's like, yep, not my job. But maybe it's a little bit my job. So it's time for Fred and Watson to actually work on the shop. It needs like some more cleaning and painting and whatever. She, her mom, her stepdad, and her uncles are sorting it out. And then one of her uncles is eating like a bowl of licorice, which is the same licorice that she found outside the room where Opal was murdered, that Watson was eating. And she's like, oh yeah, Watson loves that licorice. And her uncle's like, oh yeah, it's the only good thing that Lois makes. Fred's like, that's funny because I found it by Opal's dead body. Did Opal make licorice as well? And Uncle's like, no, they're two sisters, but the two sweet shops made no recipes the same. And Fred's like, well, that's weird because why would the licorice be in my shop, the ex-taxidermy shop that Lois had no access to? Lois apparently had no knowledge of the wheat farm. She was not involved in that business. And they're like, I don't know, maybe Opal liked it as well. She's like, no, Opal hated everything that Lois made, and I know this because I had one conversation with the woman. So her family leaves and she's like, I'm just going to stay here for a minute. And she calls Sergeant Pickle and she's like, I know who did it. I know who killed Opal. It was Lois because of the licorice. And he's like, can you hear yourself saying that? She's like, I do hear myself saying it, but nonetheless, I'm not wrong. Like, I think we'll probably keep investigating our main leads. And why would Lois kill Opal anyway? Fred is like, maybe Lois found out that Opal had been going out with the taxidermy guy. She didn't like it. She was jealous. And he's like, look, Sid's been dead for months. That's a bad theory. She's like, trust me. And he's like, okay, well, I'll look into it, but whatever. So she's leaving her shop after the phone call with Sergeant Pickle, and she sees there's a light on in Lois's sweet shop. And she's like, maybe it's Katie, because Katie and Lois have been hanging out all the time. But she knocks on the door and it's Lois. Lois invites her in and she's like, okay, time for me to do a little bit of investigating. I'm gonna go in. And she's baking and she's like, do you wanna help me bake? Katie normally helps me bake, but Katie's distancing herself from me. It's like she doesn't wanna hang out. It's like she doesn't wanna help me. And she's always got ideas for changing my recipes, but I love my recipes. So Fred helps her bake and the food is like disgusting. And honestly, I think they're kind of overdoing how disgusting a vegan brownie can be. And as they're baking, they're chatting, and Lois is saying, you know, I'd love to support Katie and run a cake shop with her, but maybe she doesn't want to hang out with me, but you want to hang out with me, and maybe we could be best friends. It's a little bit creepy. And Lois is like, just checking, you're single, right? You don't have a husband, you don't have a boyfriend, you're never gonna have a husband or a boyfriend, you're never gonna leave me. And so Fred goes, you know, it must have been hard for you when Opal started going out with Sid the taxidermist. She doesn't call him Sid the taxidermist, but I just want to keep driving home that point because I think it illustrates how eligible he was. R.I.P. Sid. And Lois is like, no, you know what? Opal always had a weakness for men. And none of them lasted very long. And Fred's kind of like, what do you mean they didn't last very long? And Lois hits her over the head with a juicer. So Fred wakes up on the floor and her hands and her feet are tied together and Lois has gone full comic book villain, which is fun. I don't want that to happen 32 times in this series. I feel like there's more than one way to be a murderer, but it's fun for this time. Lois is like, yes, I killed Sid. He was taking my sister away from me and I killed all her husbands. It was easy. So Lois is a mastermind serial killer at this point. She's just confessed to killing 4 men and she's like, and I'll kill you too. But Fred's like, why would you kill your sister? if you killed these men because they were taking her away from you, why would you kill her? And Lois said she didn't mean to kill Opal, but Opal was getting more and more involved with the weed selling, and she didn't really need Lois anymore. She had this whole business venture. It's a weed basement in a taxidermy shop. And Lois was worried that she would leave her. So she goes over there when Opal's like packing up her weed kitchen, and they have a fight, and Lois just gets really wound up and bashes her sister over the head with a rolling pin. It's basically how that happened. It's kind of like accidentally murdering your sister with a rolling pin in her drug den. It happens to the best of us. Fred also asks her, why did you kill Eddie? And she's like, who? It was a red herring all along. So Fred's in a bit of a predicament, tied up with a serial killer. It's now or never. And she does like a little, she's laying on the floor. She kind of spins her legs around. I don't know. This woman has some skills. And she trips Lois. Watson, the dog, also helps. She falls over, smacks her head on the floor, and she's silent, and there's blood. I just killed the killer. This is the skin of the killer, Bella. But then, luckily, Katie turns out. She's like, oh, what's going on here? Fred's like, is she dead? Lois isn't dead. Katie unties Fred and calls the police. Police show up, including Sergeant Pickle, who wasn't actually on duty. He's just come in like his jumper and jeans, and she's like, oh, he looks really good in jumper and jeans. So she's not too traumatized. And she's kind of like, I hate to say, I told you so. And he's like, yeah, to be fair, you did. The licorice was the clue all along. And she's like, well, remember next time. And I'm thinking, why would you say that? Why on earth would there be a next time? But he's like, yeah, good point. Because I guess they know that they're in a 32-part book series. It's meta. She gets checked out and she's going to go and have dinner with her family. She's like, look, Sergeant Pickle, would you like to come and have dinner with my family? He's like, no, they don't need reminding about me or any of this. You go hang out with your family. And you know what? I respect the man for that. He's like, maybe we can have a rain check and you and me could go out for dinner sometime. Ooh, ooh, ooh. But that was the last appearance of Sergeant Pickle. Lois gets wheeled off to hospital/prison. And then the next day, Fred goes to her shop. She's got a parcel. And the parcel is the sign for her new bookshop. By the end of the book, she's kind of starting to open her bookshop. I'm excited for the details of running a bookshop in future books. And this all takes place like over quite a short period of time. Maybe this is like a week. I think it's about mid-November. She mentions Halloween being a couple of weeks ago. And the next book is Christmas. And there's going to be another murder? I don't know how people are going to cope with that. And the writing in this book was like a lot better than I thought it was going to be honest. The blurbs are not very well written on Goodreads. And I thought this was going to be a car crash. And it's not. It's very readable. It's fun. The characters do have a sense of person. There's like half a dozen main characters in this book. And like I feel like they all have a slightly different personality. And it's funny too. There's a couple of times I actually chuckled. So it's written like quite normally. So whether or not they acknowledge these murders in future books will be kind of interesting to see. Like, will Lois and Opal ever be mentioned again? So Eddie's murder remains unsolved. That might tie in to a future book. Also, the owl. I would like to see the owl be a recurring character. And then, of course, the ongoing plot of the bookshop, which hasn't really got going yet, and the love interests. So we've got two love interests. Sergeant Branson, he gets like the vast majority of the screen time. They obviously have this whole flirtation thing. He's the obvious pick. But we also do have the ranger, Leo, who looks like Oscar de la Hoya. I like some of the townspeople. I think her uncles are going to have more of a role to play in future ones. And the couple that run the weird interior decor shop that love gossip. They were fun. I think I will definitely be reading another one of Cozy Corgi Mysteries because it was solid. There was some red herrings. There was conceivably a couple of suspects, although to be honest, you only got to know about 6 characters. So I'm going to rank this book in terms of how much the corgi solved the crime. He did eat the licorice at the crime scene, which meant that Fred remembered there was licorice at the crime scene and could piece it all together later. Although he's a dog and he just ate a sweet, so I don't know how much we can give him credit for that. I think that's like a 2.5 out of 5 corgi involvement. And in my recap, I actually missed out the scene where they make the lemon bars. It's not really important to the plot. It was pretty easy. Appreciate that. I don't know how complicated future recipes may get. That may also stop this series. I hope one time at least that the recipe in the book is part of the murder. And here are the finished lemon bars. You could not see anything. This is pretty hot. It's meant to cool down, but I want to finish filming the video. Okay, I'm going to rate the book 4 out of 5 and the lemon bars 4.5 out of 5. And maybe I'll see you for book 2, which is called Traitorous Toys. That is not a good name. You can find reviews of all the other books I read, most of which are a bit denser than the Cozy Corgi series, on my Instagram, linked underneath, and you can also find me doing other things down below. Merry November.